All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Base Botanical Boot Camp here with Austin today, and our topic this morning is flower power shrubs. One of my favorite topics because I love flowers. If you know me at all, you know that I'm loud when it comes to flower power, so I'm really going to enjoy this, I think. I've got a lot to talk about today. I got a lot of different plants. There is, as you can imagine, there's a lot of plants that flower, so I kind of brought the best ones that really give a good show, and I'm ready to go. So I'm going to kind of break this up into two different sections, if you will. I'm going to start first with some evergreen shrubs that have a lot of flower power. So typically, whenever we're talking about plants that flower, it's mainly the deciduous ones that really give you a great show. I mean, most of the time, you have to sacrifice those leaves over the wintertime to get your blooms in the spring and summer and fall. Not always the case, though. There are a number of flowering plants that are evergreen as well. So I've got coffee in me. I got some water with me. Let's just get rolling. Y'all bear with me. I do have a lot of plants all over the studio. We have limited space here, so I'm going to have to grab some and bring them up on the table, and it'll be a little bit of shifting, but I'll make it quick, and we'll get it going. So the first ones I'm going to talk about, which are blooming around town right now, if you haven't noticed, and that is going to be your azaleas. So let's start off with our classic azalea, which is this guy right here. This is a variety from Monrovia. It is in full absolute show right now. And when you say flower power, is there anything better than that? Not much. So this is an azalea, and we all think of azaleas, and we know azaleas as somewhat of a part shade-loving plant, and that is true. Some of the older varieties that we have in a different section over here on the lot, we've got two different sections of azaleas, and I'm going to talk about the second one here in a second, but this is where we keep our kind of older school azaleas in the shadier atmosphere where we have a shade tarp up in the summertime. These can handle a part shade environment up underneath trees, a nice woodland environment. That's the classic spot for azaleas. But they stay evergreen, and then they have this large flower show. I mean, look at this. It's fantastic pink blooms that are set atop this green foliage, and you can see the new foliage that's just starting to crack from the top. Those are going to replace those blooms right after it's done. So, like I said, more shade-loving azalea right here, but that stays evergreen. Now, as we shift over to the different kind of newer school azaleas, if you will, is going to be the Encore brand. So every time you come out here, you're going to see the azaleas that have Encore on the pot. It's kind of like a knockout rose. They'll always be in an Encore pot. Now, Encore azaleas, once again, a evergreen shrub, gets 3 to 4 to 5 feet tall eventually, keeps its leaves through the wintertime, and it's going to light up in the spring. Now, the biggest difference that you need to know with the Encores is that these are grown, where we receive them anyway, they are grown in Alabama, southern Alabama, in full-on sun all day long. I've talked to the growers who grow these, and they have sun all day long, so they really prefer a more sunny environment. So if you have a full sun spot, Encore azaleas will be totally fine for you. Hence the name Encore. It's like coming back on stage. They bloom in the spring. If they have enough sun, they sporadically bloom in the summertime. And then in the fall, they light up again with some blooms. Now, your best show is still in the spring, for sure. But they give you 3 different flower periods if they have enough sun. So awesome plant to use in a massing environment. You rarely just plant one azalea. You're probably going to need at least 3 to 5. Put them in a mass, and they'll do excellent for you. But once again, another evergreen that blooms. Now, real quick tip, whenever it comes to pruning azaleas, we always get that question. Let them flower in the spring. Let them go ahead and do their thing, show off, and then once their blooms are done, that's whenever we're going to do our trimming on these. Encore azaleas, and all azaleas for that matter, can get a little bit leggy if you let them. So right after they bloom, if you give them a nice trim back, take them back down into their old foliage, they'll pop back out with new green foliage that's going to be a lot tighter for you, and you'll get a prettier bloom set, if you ask me. So Encore azalea, good plant. We sell a lot of these. Now, when I'm talking about azaleas, we call them azaleas, but they're technically rhododendrons, okay? That's their genus. And since I'm talking about rhododendron, let's bring that big guy over here. Switch up. Unfortunately, you don't get to see the blooms on the rhododendron because they bloomed last week. So what you're seeing is leftover spent blooms that are already done. But I had to bring the rhododendron in here because rhododendron is probably the nicest evergreen flowering plant. It is just adorned with blooms in the springtime. It is loaded, covered up. There's purples, there's whites, there's pinks. There's even they're getting closer to red, even true red in the rhododendron world. And these are classic shade-loving plants. This is no joke. Rhododendron cannot take full sun all day long, especially in Middle Tennessee. Now, it is just they can get very, very large. And rhododendron also is pretty slow to grow. All right, but if you get it in a nice morning sun, afternoon shade environment, or if you get it in a scenario to where it's up underneath trees, like I said earlier, like a woodland environment with ferns and hostas, as like, your rhododendron is kind of your backdrop with all those other shade-loving plants. Sun through the trees, filtered light all day long is an excellent scenario for rhododendron. And avoid a wet spot. These plants do not like to keep their feet wet. They don't like to stay boggy by any means. They need nice, well-drained, rich soil. If you have that spot in your house, rhododendron is certainly for you, because it is just, you talk about flower power. There is nothing like it. I wish that this thing was blooming for you. I'm sorry that it's not, but excellent plant to grow if you have the right environment. And rhododendron can be a little picky. Azaleas too. Y'all just know, whenever you first plant these things, they take a minute to kind of set in and latch in. It takes a season or two to get them kind of going. So be patient with them. Don't expect a ton of growth whenever you first plant them. But as long as they get settled in and they find that home that they like, they're a great plant to grow. All right. That's evergreen rhododendron and evergreen azaleas. While I'm here, we're going to go with one more, which is truly stunning, but not evergreen. This is a deciduous azalea. So look at this thing. It's about to show off. What I love about deciduous azalea is that they're just bare sticks through the wintertime, and then they start to form these buds in the early spring, and then those buds start to crack right about now. And so you get this true show of just flowers. See, I've got a little bit of leaves coming on right here, mainly at the base, but they're not all that noticeable. What is noticeable is those showy blooms. And my God, this is gorgeous. I mean, a deep orange, almost red bud opening to a true orange bloom right here. Just absolutely lit up. This one's called Tallulah Sunrise, and it is just a gorgeous plant. They get fairly large. You can expect these. They're also, once again, slow growing, but they can get up. I've seen literally like 6 to 8 foot tall deciduous azaleas. And we think of deciduous azaleas, or I do anyway, of the Great Smoky Mountains. People come from all over the world to see our deciduous azaleas in East Tennessee and North Carolina, just lit up on hillsides. It's a show you got to see at some point in your life to go out there whenever they're in bloom. They're probably getting to be budded up, almost in bloom now. So the classic, just beautiful shrub, because they have so many flowers without leaves around them. So they just really light up. It's another variety called Mandarin Lights we sell out here that's just gorgeous, and there's a number of them. I've got a bunch right now, so if you need some, they're great to put in the garden. Another one that's not, they can handle full sun. Okay, I talked to growers on this as well. They can handle full sun, but they're fairly thirsty whenever you give them full sun. So the first couple seasons, you kind of have to make sure they're not drying out on you in the full sun. Now, they do benefit from a little bit of afternoon shade as well, or like I said, a nice filtered light throughout the day, amongst the trees. So just a really cool plant. You don't see them near as much. You don't think of, whenever someone says azaleas, you don't really think of these, but certainly could have a spot in your garden for 1 or 3 of these just to light up in the early spring. So there we go. Those are some the 4 kind of different varieties of azaleas and rhododendron that we sell here, and there's multiple varieties within all of these. So like I said, flower power, azaleas are kind of number 1. They're the early spring bloomers, and they're lit up right now. Certainly worth having in the garden. It is an evergreen plant called Elysium parviflorum, and it has got some flower power, y'all. You've never even seen it. You probably never even heard of it. It does prefer some shade, so this is going to be another one that we put in that woodland scene. It's a large growing plant, fairly slow to get there. What it does have, though, is these beautiful star-shaped red blooms. You can see a nice big one right in there going, and you don't even think about them. Like I said, you don't even notice this plant. It's just a kind of evergreen, kind of get lost in the garden type of plant until it blooms. And then another thing we have to speak of is whenever it does bloom. We talk about, scents in the garden. We want to smell our flowers as much as we can, and there's some that smell good. And then there's Elysium. Elysium smells horrible, y'all. I'm sitting right next to it right now, and it smells like dead fish. I know that's not a great selling point to y'all, for you to want to have one in the garden. But if you like the look of it, it's certainly great for a shade garden. But It is stinky. I'm telling you, it is killing me right now. It is just this fish smelling, dead fish smelling bloom right next to my face. It bugs me. But I usually like to, at least whenever I'm showing people Elysium, at least tell them to get down there and smell that bloom and see what you think. Some people don't mind it near as much. I'm amazed. It is offensive to me, but some people like it. But if you really like red and you like an evergreen foliage for the shade, Elysium could be a cool plant for you. They're still pretty cheap. It's not a very expensive plant or anything. So we always keep them on deck, and you just don't think about them. But it's a good space filler evergreen plant that does light up with some red. If you're into red, this is a good one for you. So let me get this stinky thing out of here. All right, working back to another. Oh, God, it's heavy. Okay, look at this. Look at this. Oh, my goodness. All right, so this plant right here is called Pieris, Pieris japonica. And it is another shade lover. It does not want sun all the time, y'all. It really doesn't. It's a shady loving plant that most of the time gets pretty big. The typical varieties can get pretty big. Now, let me tell you, this one is slow. And I mean real slow. I had a customer the other day tell me he planted one, and he showed me a picture. This was in like 1991. He told me that he planted this Pieris shrub. It's regular old Pieris japonica. Nothing special. Put it on the side of his house. And he showed me a picture the other day, and it is literally about 8 or 9 foot tall now. He loves it. Like I said, he's had it since 91. That's like 30-something years ago now, y'all. And he planted it small. And like I said, it was about 8 to 9 feet tall, and it was really, really pretty. And gosh, when they bloom in the spring, they just got these little cupped white blooms. There are pink varieties out there now as well. They're kind of like on chains almost. They're just gorgeous. They really, really are. But Pieris, I want y'all to know, is a little bit picky. We have a lot of people that have issues with them. Now, in East Tennessee, this plant does great, and it thrives. A little bit different scenario. That's similar with the azaleas I was talking about. In East Tennessee, they're all just money. Around here, they can be a little tricky. We have very heavy clay soil sometimes, and they're not always into that. And they don't like wet feet, similar to rhododendron. They don't like to be in a wet spot whatsoever. So they kind of want dry shade. But if you have a spot in the garden that is another kind of woodland scene, I know I keep going back to that, but they look great in that scenario. There's dwarf varieties now that stay a little bit smaller, but they're so slow to grow that they almost stay small because they just take forever to get there. The new growth, I know this is flower power, and I'm showing you the flowers, but the new growth on these is really, really pretty too. It usually cracks like this pink, red, new leaves that are just atop of this whole green plant, so you get this almost 3-tone effect with red leaves, white blooms, and green foliage behind it. Cool little plant to grow, but can be picky, so be patient with this little guy, and make sure you give it a well-drained, rich, nutrient, soil. And also protection from afternoon sun. It will get a little damaged. Also, if we have really, really nasty winters, cold winters specifically, you can see the top growth of this plant get a little bit singed. It goes almost kind of whitish. It just doesn't like it super, super cold. We had a pretty chilly winter this year, and I've seen a couple pictures actually. Just yesterday, a guy showed me a picture of his Pieris that he had planted, and the undergrowth was still green, but the top part was just a little off-color, whitish. It just looked like it got burned by the cold. So be mindful of that. It can happen. It's not like your plant's going to die or anything, but you might have to prune off that top growth that got burned and let some new stuff flush behind it. So underused plant, I think, but people do have issues with them. So stick with them. They're a little slow, but they will get there, and they're a showstopper when they're in bloom. Cool plant. Okay, now I brought another one. Here we go. Just looks like a green shrub right now. Unfortunately, it does not have any blooms on it, but when you talk about flower power, you cannot leave out Camellia. Camellia, there's literally, y'all, a Camellia society. There are people, I don't even know, probably 1,000 different cultivars of Camellia now. You could write a whole book on camellias, how much they're hybridizing these plants. But the blooms on these things are all over the place when it comes to color. So you've got true white, you've got true pink, you got soft pink, you've got dark pink, you've got, there's even close to red out there now. All sorts of different petal counts and flower shapes, some that are fully double, some that have really pronounced stamens and pistils, and the reproductive part of the flower is very pronounced, with that being yellow and the rest being, say, pink or white. There are camellias that bloom in the fall, and there's camellias that bloom in the early spring. So most of them that have bloomed in the early spring have kind of already bloomed or blooming right now. I have some fall blooming camellias at my house, and they're a soft pink, kind of a single bloom, but they're pretty profuse, and it's a nice little large evergreen flowering shrub. So they get large. It's another backdrop plant. They do, here in Middle Tennessee, kind of want some afternoon shade. They're another little shadier lover. I've got mine up against the brick wall, so it stays pretty warm. That's another thing I should mention. These aren't the cold hardiest plants on earth. So down in South Carolina, in Georgia, Alabama, camellias are fine, no problem. Out here in Middle Tennessee, if you don't give them a little protection or you put them out in the yard just in a really like windy, cold spot, you're probably going to see some damage on camellias. So do know that. Like I said, I've got mine tucked up against the brick wall in the corner kind of my home, so it gets protection from winter winds, and they stay pretty well protected. Truly evergreen, glossy leaves with a fantastic bloom. So, but do expect them to get large. Like I said, not the fastest to grow. And they can get a touch leggy if you don't prune them. So whenever you see these long stems, these are just starting to crack their new leaves. If you want them to be a little bit tighter, a little bit to get the blooms a little bit more close together, so it provides this really big flower power show, you kind of want to do some tip pruning on them. Anything that gets up a little tall, go ahead and take it back down a little bit, and you'll see a nice bushier plant. If left untrimmed, though, camellias can reach that 8 to 12 foot mark. And even bigger with age. You go out to Japan and you might see some, or China specifically, you might see like 20, 25 foot tall camellias. That's where they really want to be, out in Asia. But they've been hybridized so much here. They're breeding them to be more cold hardy and with excellent flower power. So I wish they had some right now, but you can Google camellia and just look at all the varieties of them. They are fantastic. So good plant to grow for that little kind of mixed sun shade environment. But expect a large growing shrub because they do get there. Don't really have too many dwarf varieties really of camellia yet. Not that I've seen anyway. We're still talking, 6, 8, 10, 12 feet tall. So expect that. But good plant to grow. Just give them a little bit of winter protection. So there we go. We have pretty much gotten through, and this isn't everything that flowers that's evergreen, but these are kind of the showiest ones. And like I said, these are all the evergreens. I'm going to wrap that up, and we're going to get on to deciduous flowering shrubs. And they typically give you a ton of flower power. So let's get some of them up here, and I'll show you. All right, bear with me. I'm going to go viburnum on y'all.
Oh, that's a new phrase.
Do what?
That's a new phrase.
Yeah. Okay. Viburnum. Okay, so people almost always... Actually, let me get this. Let me start with the original here. All right. So, this one is just getting started. This is an eastern snowball bush. Almost always mixed up with hydrangeas. People come out and they say, I want them... what do they say? I want that snowball bush, okay? That's a very common phrase we hear all the time. If people think of snowball bush, they either think hydrangea or they think viburnum. For the most part, they're talking about viburnum and you don't even know it. So if you're talking about those plants that are in bloom right now around town, I'm talking big white balls as big as my head that are on large shrubs, or even you would call them trees eventually. They can get very large. This viburnum right here can get very, very big. This is your classic eastern snowball bush, and this one right here is just starting. So we've got green balls that are just forming. They are nowhere near the size they are gonna be. They get very, very large and crisp white. Around town, like I said, these are in show right now. So classic, awesome shrub that you forget about until they're lit up. They're not all that showy when they're not in bloom. Their leaf isn't all that great. Their habit, that means like their form, like how they look, is a little bit ratty. Not gonna lie to you, they're not like real tidy or anything. But whenever they light up, everybody comes out for them and they say, I want them snowball bushes that are in bloom right now. So the biggest thing I can tell you, viburnum versus hydrangea, is viburnum is a spring bloomer. Hydrangea is a summer bloomer. So depends on what time of year you're seeing those big white balls. This time of year, it's viburnum, and this is the good old eastern snowball. You really can't beat it. Everyone should have one of these in their yard, I think. It's a singular. You don't need like a mass of these. Now, don't get me wrong. A mass of these would be fantastic. But one single one in the garden or just out in the yard is certainly worth having just for that springtime bloom. That is just fantastic. So, snowball bush, viburnum, spring bloomer, okay? Not hydrangea. Good plant, though. Really, really hardy. When I talk about viburnums in general, very, very hardy across the board. Like, you don't have to do much of anything. No added fertilizer, no extra water. They're not weird about that. They can live in a lot of different scenarios. These can even live in a fairly shady spot, honestly, but they prefer full sun to give you the best blooms. But viburnum is very tolerant of a lot of different scenarios, so worth growing. Awesome. All right, moving on. This is called a Japanese snowball. So much. Let me get that weed out of there. Much different style of a bloom right here. So you've got kind of cool crinkly leaves, which I kind of like. But then you've got this open flower set that is just pure white. They're kind of creamy yellow early, and then they open to this crisp white. And it's kind of this flat spray of blooms, and it's kind of tucked amongst the foliage. This is a little shrubby guy right now, looking really, really good with that green backdrop. But in the landscape, whenever these get big, I'm talking like 8 to 10 feet tall, just a large growing shrub, and they're in full bloom. I mean, they're showstoppers. They'll make you take a double take and see what that was. There's a lot of them that are blooming around town right now, and like I said, with viburnum across the board, you don't ever notice them. You just blend in with the backdrop. They just, whatever. It's just an old green shrub, and then they bloom, and you're like, whoa, what is that? And this is no different. So around town right now, like I said, you're probably seeing them. They're tucked amongst the foliage. This nice little flat spray of blooms, pure white. Awesome plant. Like I was saying earlier with viburnum, very tolerant of almost any type of soil, any type of sun or shade. Not deep, heavy shade, but just lit up white right now. Fantastic. The leaf shape on this is actually fairly attractive. I'm not mad at that. So good little plant to grow, y'all. You just can't really beat a viburnum in the spring. Let me give you one more. All right, sorry. All right, I'm back. This is another type of Japanese snowball. Now, this is viburnum, or this is Monrovia, introduction of one of theirs, and they have called this one popcorn viburnum, and hence the name. It is a dentatum. It still is. Let me see here. It's a plicatum, and it's just gorgeous. So they're taking these types of viburnums, and they're always hybridizing. They're always trying to breed for better. And this one's called popcorn, now, hence the name. They're going to be white, and they're a little bit smaller. They're not the full eastern snowball blooms that you're talking about, like I was saying earlier, as big as your head. These are smaller, but what you get when you get smaller blooms typically is more of them. And this thing is absolutely loaded with pure white blooms. They've been blooming for about a week out here already. And it's just a fantastic, gorgeous little plant. If you like white and you like green with it, and you like a shrub that's going to get large, that's very tolerant of most things, viburnum is probably the way to go, y'all. This is flower power. Really, really good. Pure white blooms, like I said, a little bit smaller, though, but you got a lot of them. So Monrovia's version of their viburnums that they're growing. And Monrovia is an excellent plant grower. They really do a good job with what they do. A little bit on the high side price wise, but you're gonna love it, and it's gonna do well for you. So certainly this one is a showstopper. Absolute showstopper. Okay, so I'm done with viburnum. There are more viburnum. I need to talk about one that I did not bring in here because they're really gangly and leggy, and they were just too big for me to bring in. But there's another one called Korean Spice viburnum that's got excellent smell. It smells so good. It's pink in bud, and then it opens up to a pure white, a little bit daintier, smaller, like kind of roundish blooms. But you get this two-tone effect with it, where you get that pink and then you get that white, and you get the knock you down scent that is just really, really good. Smells awesome to me. So check that one out as well whenever you come out here, and I think you'll like it. They're still in bloom right now. You can see them and you can smell them. So come get you one. Viburnum. Such an easy, tolerant plant. Okay, so switching gears. What should I do next? Let's go to, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's just go to hydrangea, because you cannot talk about plants and you cannot talk about flower power and not talk about hydrangea. There's a number of them. I brought in like at least 4, I think, to show you. And let's go over that real quick. Just give me 1 second. I got to grab a few, and I'll be right back.
While Austin is grabbing those, there will be on May 12th a webinar on new Monrovia varieties for 2022. So if you're a fan of Monrovia, you should check that webinar out.
Nice. Okay. Now, I've done webinars on hydrangeas before in different species and different looks, and I'm not going to get that deep because I'm pretty sure I talked for like an hour about hydrangeas on one of our previous webinars, but I'm going to run with you and run through some of these, some of my favorites, some really, really good ones. So our most classic flower power hydrangea that we all think of first, I think, is going to be the Macrophylla hydrangea. So Macrophylla, macro meaning big, phylla meaning leaf. The big leaf hydrangeas. These are the ones you think about in that classic Southern Living magazine garden, the blue balls, the pink balls of blooms. And you just, now, this is a little bit deceiving. Hydrangeas aren't even thinking about blooming yet, y'all. This one is. And we can achieve that because a lot of these plants are grown in greenhouses in different parts of the country, and their conditions are totally different, so they can get blooms a lot earlier in the season. Don't expect yours to be blooming right now at all, but I brought some in because they were. This one is a blue variety, and this one's Monrovia called Blue Enchantress, which has been a really popular variety. It's got these beautiful dark stems. I mean, like black stems with blue atop of that with the green foliage mixed in with it. Really beautiful plant. You can get that. There we go. And it's just starting. These blooms are going to get much bigger than this as well. But awesome hydrangea. It's the classic one we think of. Now, this plant prefers afternoon shade. Do not put it in a full sun environment. It's going to wilt. Even if it has plenty of water down below, it'll still wilt. We call that sun wilting. So the sun's just beating on it. It's just like, it just doesn't want the crazy amount of sun in the afternoon. But filtered light environment throughout the day through the trees is great. Morning sun up until roughly noon is fine. You can even take it a little bit past that as it ages. As the plant kind of sets in and ages and gets through 2 or 3 or 4 seasons, it can seem to handle more sun because the roots are much deeper. But still, avoid an afternoon hot spot with these right here. The biggest tip I can give you too when it comes to pruning on these, everyone has this question. And this is the one that blooms off of old wood. So we need to keep some stems up over the wintertime. Do not cut them all the way back to the dirt. Now you're going to see hydrangeas reshoot from the roots every year. So what you get is if you leave the sticks up, if we don't have a horrible winter and we don't have a late frost, what you're going to see is the old sticks are going to send out leaves. They're going to crack leaves, and then you're going to see sucker sprouts come up from the roots behind them. So you end up getting this like 4 foot by 4 foot shrub by the end of the season. And if they're happy and if they're healthy, they are show-stopping bloomers. I mean, just fantastic. Everybody loves them. You can't deny it. Everybody does. So another big tip is not even a tip, just a fact. If hydrangeas have a low pH, they're going to be more blue. If they're in soil that has a higher pH, they're going to be more pink. So we can kind of change that with some soil acidifier. If you want blue or if you want pink, we can help you out with that. But that's what you're working with your depending on where your pH is what your color you're going to get. So classic hydrangea. Okay, another hydrangea. Here we go. This one's oak leaf hydrangea. Probably my least favorite of the hydrangeas. That's just me. But a lot of people like their oak leaves. They get very large. If you need a good space filling or you got a fence line you want to break up with a large growing shrub, these guys can get 8 to 10 feet tall if you let them. Now, this specific variety is called munchkin, and hence the name, it's going to stay small. Now, small is relative. Okay, if a plant can get 8 to 10 feet tall, the dwarf is going to be, 4 to 5 to 6 feet tall. So get ready for that. These can be pruned over the wintertime just fine. Take the sticks. You want to leave some of the stems up if you can, but clean them up over the wintertime. Get them back uniform, and then you'll get a nice flush in the spring. But hence the name oak leaf hydrangea. They've got a leaf that looks similar to an oak tree. And then it is filled in the summer, late spring into summer, with all these kind of almost star-shaped petal blooms on this long conical style bloom. Okay, so it's not like round or anything. It's much more on a cone shape. But once again, when it is in bloom and it's pure white, it's really a good looking plant. And then all of them are going to fade to like this reddish color. And that's almost true with all these hydrangeas. Not the one I just talked about. That doesn't really fade. I mean, it does a little bit. But the oak leaves are going to go from that pure white to a reddish bloom, and you can use them as cut flowers. They actually do pretty well as cut flowers whenever the flowers are spent. But good little plant to grow, oak leaf hydrangea. Like I say, little plant, it ain't little. They get big, so get ready for that.
And they are actually my favorite hydrangea.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, because of that red color in the fall. They're so beautiful.
Oh, I forgot to mention that. You're right, Tyler. Okay, fall color on oak leaf hydrangea is going to be the best out of all the hydrangeas. Most hydrangeas don't really have fall color to speak of, all that great. But
it
oak
hangs
leaf
on
does.
for so long.
It does hang on. Even, there's sometimes we receive hydrangeas from the previous season that still have some of their old leaves on there that are this reddish burgundy color. And you can see that even persist into the next spring.
Yeah.
So you're right, Tyler. It does have good fall color. I'll give you that.
Yeah, and the dried flowers. Winter
That's true.
interest,
But, this is a flower power show. And, the flower power on oak leaf it doesn't do it for me as much, okay? All right, but you're right. Fall color is money.
I'm factoring in like the bloom set against the leaves, which are striking and stunning to me.
Okay, you're right. I get it. Just
I've
as
driven
hydrangeas
around
go, it's my
Inglewood
least.
too much, and there's lots of really good, big, established oak leaves in Inglewood.
There are.
Hot tip.
Yeah. Well, there. You start looking around, they're everywhere. So, all right, moving on. Next hydrangea, which is by far our best seller. Before I leave oak leaf, they also prefer a little bit of protection from the sun. They just don't like it intense hot all day long or anything. Now, switching gears, this one does. This one's called Limelight hydrangea. By far our best seller. By far a large growing shrub if you let it. This one has, once again, hence the name Limelight. It comes out kind of with greenish buds, and they're also on a cone shape. We call these the panicle style hydrangeas. Refers to the shape of the bloom. So it's kind of this cone shape, starts off kind of greenish, and then is going to go to that pure white that we all love. Everybody knows Limelight hydrangea. Pure white blooms, and then those are even going to fade to this pinkish color. Now, there is a number of different cultivars of panicle-style hydrangeas nowadays, and a lot of them are marketed towards they have like a two-name. It's like a vanilla strawberry or strawberry shake, and that refers to the strawberry being the pinkish color after the bloom fades. So once it starts fading, it's going to have this two-tone kind of look to where half of the bloom is pink, half of it's white, and it's going to end up going all this kind of reddish color after it finishes. But if you want a vigorous, large-growing, easy plant to grow for a full sun environment, I'm telling you all, these bloom best in full sun. I mean, we only term full sun at least 4 to 6 hours a day, but this plant will take it all day long. It sits out on our lot on hot asphalt 100% of the year. We never give it any shade, never gets a break from the sun. You can't give it any more sun than what we do. So don't be scared if you got full sun, if you think, oh, my hydrangeas can't do that. This one certainly can. So Limelight hydrangea, big, large growing shrub. I really recommend pruning this every single year over the winter time. So whenever it's truly dormant, you just have a whole bunch of sticks. Take those sticks way back. I mean, even like past a third. General rule of thumb is to not take plants back more than a third. Well, this one it doesn't matter. An established limelight, you could literally cut down to the ground. It's going to come back, and it's going to bloom off all that new wood. So excellent, easy, full sun plant to grow. Limelight hydrangea, flower power at its best. Okay. Let's talk about the last hydrangea that I brought in here. This may be my favorite, I got to say. I have these at my house. I've got 5 of these. Planted in a massing scenario all together, only planted them about 2 feet apart. I mean, I wanted them tight, and this is Incredible hydrangea. I do a little series here called It's Worth a Grow, and Incredible certainly made the list. Let me see. Can we get that down?
Yeah, no.
Back to where we were. All right, Incredible hydrangea.
Incredible.
So, if you like white and you like round balls, this is certainly the shrub for you. This plant gets so big. I mean, it gets I say so big. It's about 4.5 to 5 feet tall every single season. It blooms, I mean, without any problem every single year. They're so easy to grow. they have very sturdy stems. Now, what we all think of when we think about the arborescens type of hydrangea, which is what these are, we think about Annabelle hydrangea. That's the most classic. We still sell the full out of Annabelles. They come in all the time. They're a good little plant. It's kind of the original when it comes to these classic white round blooms that we all kind of like. Now, Incredible is an improved variety from that. So, hence the name Incredible. They are much bigger blooms, and what's different about them is they have very chunky stems, very sturdy stems. Annabelles have a bad problem about after a windstorm, rainstorm, thunderstorm in the summertime when they're in full bloom, they get really heavy. They can get really loaded with water within those blooms, and then they flop. And then a hydrangea that lays on the ground is horrible. I hate it. There's nothing worse than that, than seeing these beautiful blooms that you've been waiting all spring and all winter for to show up in the summertime and then have the rain just lay them down. Incredible does not do that. I can say this because I've seen them. I was standing on my porch one time in literally a thunderstorm just to watch the Incredible hydrangeas and how they held up. And it was windy. It was rainy. It was no joke, a storm. And I just watched them. They're blowing in the breeze, blowing, getting crazy. It's a huge storm. After the storm ends, they're just stood up and as perky as can be. I mean, really, the stems are chunky, excellent little plant to grow. Prefers a little afternoon shade. I'm not going to lie to you. On the first season when I planted these, during the summertime, they wilted on me and I had to water. Right after you water, in about 15 minutes, they perk back up and they're happy again. But on that first season, I did have to supplement with water on the summer because they did wilt on me. And that's another little point I need to make with all these hydrangeas. If they're thirsty, y'all, they will wilt. They wilt hard. I mean, it's very, very noticeable. So on a first season in the summertime, keep your eye on your hydrangeas. If you come home one day and you see them just wilting from the sun, water them. Like I said, about 15 minutes, they'll perk back up. But then after that, I went through this second season last year, and after they've really latched in and rooted into the earth, I did not have to water them a single time last year. They are up in my garden right now, ready to go, just leafed out, looking good, happy, and one of my favorite hydrangeas, if not my favorite hydrangea. Excellent, excellent bloomer. Flower power, baby. I mean, I'm telling you, really, really nice. And an excellent cut flower. After they're dried and those blooms go brown, they look good with other things. So cutting those blooms just to deadhead to make your shrub look better, and then bringing those blooms inside of your house to put in a vase really adds for a different look to mix other flowering plants or even leafy plants into your arrangements in your home. Makes a good little dried cut flower. So there we go. Those are the 4 hydrangeas we're talking about today. So like I said, when you talk about hydrangeas, you can certainly expect some flower power out there. All right, let me switch up.
We got one question when you get back, Austin.
What's up? You want to go ahead and...
Okay.
Well, hold on. All right, I got to shift around here, y'all. I'm going to switch gears on y'all, and we're about to go old school. Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I can't see the Abelia in the front.
It's okay. I'll bring it up.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about them individually.
Okay.
All right. What's the question?
What about cherry laurel? And, this is a flower power webinar, granted, but...
It is, and that's a good question. You're not wrong. Cherry laurel, skip laurel, autoleucon laurels, those are kind of our hedgy, leafy plants. And there's no doubt they have some flower power, especially this time of year. It's not I guess the blooms aren't as... they're showy whenever they're in full blooms. The shrubs themselves are showy. I don't know why I didn't bring them in here. They're a little big and they're in bloom right now. I probably should have brought them in, but it is another evergreen. It's a good one for an evergreen hedgy type plant or screening plant with your skip laurels that gets much taller. They do have pure white blooms that kind of race up the stems. It's like a long, like kind of cylindrical bloom, if you will. But there's a whole bunch of them, and they actually are really showy. So good question. I should have brought that in. Sorry I didn't, but we have some right now, and they are in full bloom. So good one. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go backbone here. Around here, when things that live and live well without hardly any effort is what we call backbone around here. Been around for a while, for a long time, and we still sell them today. So any one of these will work. Let's start first with good old Van Houtte spirea right here. Look at this gangly old thing. That's kind of what they do. It's kind of a small, it's very, very small blooms, but there's like 1 million of them. So it's a very, very showy plant. They are blooming around town right now. once again, another shrub that you just almost kind of think is a weed until it starts blooming. And then you're like, whoa, that's pretty nice. I actually passed a house that had this line in their driveway. All the way down their driveway, they use Van Houtte spirea. And it is so showy whenever they're in bloom that it makes you take a double take for sure. So they're blooming, and like I said, it's gangly. This plant gets big. Like, if left untrimmed, 6 foot, and really almost like a 5 to 6 foot spread. Like, they're just a bushy old gangly thing. But it is backbone because they live, and they live without a problem. You set this thing out, water it once pretty much, and you're good for a lifetime almost. I mean, they don't die. They really don't. They just come back. They're fine. A lot of old school country homes out in the country have these that you just, like I said, you don't notice them till they're blooming, and then they do, and you're like, whoa. So old school classic spirea is great for a good show in the springtime with a pretty large growing plant, full sun environment, but no other special requirements other than that. So good one, been around a while.
The blooms remind me of candy tuft, but I guess it gets bigger than that. Right?
Certainly gets bigger than candy tuft. Candy tuft's a small little perennial, but yeah, totally different growth form on that. Now, while we're on the topic of spirea, let me bring this one over. All right. This is a newer spirea. So spirea has been around for a long time, like I said, but they're coming out with new stuff all the time. And this one is nice because of the two-tone foliage that you get as well. So this one has, what's this one called? Big Bang. Let's see. Double play Big Bang. And then hence the name, whenever you hear double or double bang, you're going to typically see a two-time bloomer. So this one can be a rebloomer. The leaves emerge just this nice red with this kind of working down to orange and then working back into green. Good little small growing plant. Spireas are a pretty tidy little guy. They can be planted out in front of other shrubs in little groupings, little massing environments because they don't get all that big and they're fairly tidy. Now, to keep them tidy, you need to give them a prune over the wintertime. So they're going to be kind of sticky, kind of stemmy. They got real thin stems. All spirea just has that. Very bunched up stems. They're very tight. So if you go in there over the wintertime and just buzz them back to a shape, nice and tight, get it back tight in there, they'll bust in the spring for you really tight, just like this one did. And you get a lot of blooms out of it. Now, this one's going to be a pink bloomer. A lot of them are. And it just sits atop the foliage, just a nice pink bloom. So they'll last for a few weeks. And then once to get them to rebloom really well, right after they're done blooming, y'all, go ahead and give it a buzz cut. So just take all those blooms off. We just call that deadheading pretty much. And you can get some of the leaves. Don't worry so much. It's a very tough, easy plant to grow. Deadhead them. Get all those blooms buzzed off of there. And then you'll see a pretty quick response of leaves and then usually another rebloom. So you can keep these things blooming longer as long as you trim them back and keep that flower going. So another spirea, excellent to grow. Like I said, smaller. These can be used in much different scenarios. Another one that's going to prefer full sun for the best foliage color and the best bloom. So do that. Also well drained, not a wet spot, okay? They don't like that. All right. So now let's get back into some old school stuff. This here is a plant that nobody even knows exists, I don't think. This one is called Deutzia. And if you grow Deutzia and you've had it before, you probably love it. It's a good little plant. It's easy to grow. It is very shrubby. It gets very dense. And it almost has, I would say, an arching habit. So those stems, as they age, as this one's kind of turning down, this stem right here, like they get up and then they kind of go down. And they've got these gorgeous little dainty white blooms that you never even think about until it's in bloom. There's a number of varieties of these now. You can get them in pink. Most of the time they're pink in bud, and then they open up to a white. There's even one now that's like pink and white on the same bloom. They weren't blooming right now, or otherwise I would have brought it in. But they are really, really stunning. And if you're looking for say you've got a stretch that you just want to fill with like a mass of something, a plant that gets roughly 4 to 5 feet tall and wide and just makes a dense kind of thicket, this could be cool for you. A whole bunch of them in a line. They actually got a picture here that they're showing. I don't know if you can see that, Tyler, but that's planted in like a hedge, like along, with other like trees and stuff surrounding. And it just makes this mass of white on these just large growing shrubs. Once again, though, y'all, easy as pie to grow, set it and forget it type of plant. And then whenever they're in bloom, it just reminds you how much you like them because they're such a dainty little white bloom. Cute varieties, extra green leaves, really good plant to grow and easy to grow.
Any smell? Any aroma?
Nothing.
Oh.
No, I ain't got nothing on this on this one. I don't smell anything. But
Sometimes when I take a sniff, I am disappointed. Other times I'm surprised.
You would think all flowers would have a scent, but really, to our nose, and they might to insects and animals and such, but to our noses, for my nose anyway, I'm not getting any scent on this one.
No,
not for that. But pure white dainty blooms, get you a Deutzia, throw it out there. They're worth growing. They really are. And check out the new varieties that they're coming out with. We have a little section of them right now. They're just about to bloom. Come out and look at them. They're really kind of cool. I think they're best used in like a perennial, like mixed perennial bed. Like have this as the backdrop in a perennial bed, and then you put some sun-loving perennials out in front of them. It looks well, and it looks good in that scenario.
Yeah.
So, all right. And one of the other backbones, the old, what we call wiggles around here. Weigela is the name of this plant. And I brought in a dark leaf variety. So typically your old school Weigela is going to be just a green leaf variety with typically pink blooms on it. Been around forever. Once again, old country homes that have been around since forever have some large growing old school Deutzia out there. And then whenever they're in bloom, they're just really pretty. They've got this fluted bloom. So it's kind of long, tuberous, if you will, and nice pink blooms. And this one, which a lot of them nowadays are being bred to have purple leaves. That's why I brought this in. It's got this, extra purple leaf with like green veins in it, which is attractive to me. I find the odd things in plants, and that's like got a green, very green, lime looking veiny leaf to it, which I find interesting. And just what do you call this? Just a large growing shrub. I mean, that's just as basic as I can tell you.
That gets loaded with blooms.
It gets absolutely loaded with blooms, and they're even making new ones that come out with a second set of blooms as well. Now, your best bloom period is certainly like now, kind of now-ish. Within the next few weeks, we'll start seeing Weigela, perk up. But yeah, just a blobby kind of shrub if left untrimmed. Once again, though, it's a deciduous plant, and we do our pruning typically over the winter time. So if you want a tighter bloomer, then you're going to go ahead and give this a nice buzz cut as well over the winter time. Get it kind of back to tight, and then it's going to bust out in the springs with tight foliage, and then some tight blooms behind that. So once again, backbone, been around forever. Weigela, set it and forget it. All these plants I just brought up here are like that. Very, very easy to take care of. So another backdrop scenario for a full sun is a good spot for Wiggles, and it's got a place in the garden. Not necessarily for me. I don't know why. Wiggles doesn't really do it for me all that much, but the dark leaves can really be attractive in certain scenarios. So don't forget about Wiggles. She's been forgotten about a little bit, and she needs a good home. So don't forget Wiggles. All right, last one of the backbones. Got it out front. And Abelia. Y'all, Abelia's been around for a long time. The regular one, just the old school one, is just called glossy Abelia. That's just an excellent, easy to grow shrub that gets very, very large. Now, what they're doing nowadays is making all these new Abelias with foliage color. So this one's kind of nice for flower power, most definitely. But foliage color is actually very attractive as well with these. This one right here is called Twist of Orange. There's also Twist of Lime. There's Twist of Lemon. There's Kaleidoscope, which is probably our best seller. All of these have variegated foliage, this one being yellow and green with kind of some reddish stems. So you get a lot of color in these. These are a lot tidier I say tidy. They're not necessarily tidy. They're shorter than the other ones that I've kind of mentioned. Abelia's MO typically is that it's going to get wider than it is tall. So I've noticed that my mother grows Kaleidoscope Abelia at her house, and we trim them for her. And what I've certainly noticed over the past 5 years they've been growing is that their width changes much quicker than their height does. So getting 3 to 5 of these in a grouping and making this massing scenario, really you can plant them like 4 feet apart. If you have this big area in a bed, big areas can be tricky sometimes because they get expensive if you're really trying to get a bunch of different a lot of stuff in there. So what you can do is get something like Abelia to eat up some space in the bed, planting, like I said, about 5, kind of within that 3 to 5 foot range away from each other and let them just all grow together and make this mass. That's the way to use Abelia. Now, these are going to bloom. These start blooming in the summertime. So they'll start pink in bud typically, and they're going to open to a white as well. So you've got a lot of buds with a lot of blooms at the same time. So you actually get this like two-tone look of pink and white with Abelia. And they really bloom for a long time, y'all. I mean, they're like late summer all the way to frost. Like really. Glossy Abelia, which is the goat, it's a large growing shrub. Once it starts blooming, it literally does not stop until frost. It is an excellent grower, easy to grow. Cut them as much as you want. Don't matter. They're coming back. But once again, Abelia, good for foliage, long bloom set. They're not even thinking about blooming yet, but once they start, they don't stop till frost. So
tiny blooms, but many.
Very, very tiny blooms. But there's so many of them that it just creates this really, really nice show. And then once again, an easy plant to grow. Not anything, no special treatment needed with any of these that I just talked about. So worth growing. There's so many varieties of Abelia. Let us walk you around and show you the differences and throw them in the garden because they're, like I said, good space filler plant. All right, those were the backbones. And now, this will be...
You got a final round there, right?
Final round, yep. We got 3 more to talk about. And then we'll be out of here. I know we're in the studio at the moment. I know we're probably getting busy out on the nursery. Y'all, it has been wild out here. So expect to have some people, but bear with us. We're doing what we can to get to your questions and all that, but we're gearing up. We're busy out here.
We got a couple questions coming in already. And while Austin gets these plants in here, I'm just going to say, chat them out. If you're on Facebook, we'll take your questions as they come in. And thank you all for joining us on Zoom. So keep them coming.
All right, here we go. Okay. You can't talk about flower power and not talk about roses, okay? I love roses. I did an 1.5-hour webinar on roses once. I just kept going. I couldn't stop myself. I kept going. But
it's out there. It's on YouTube if you want to check him out.
Yeah, it was a long one. But anyway, so most roses in Middle Tennessee are a little tricky, y'all. I ain't gonna lie to you, especially the coolest ones. The ones that I'm into, which are going to be the hybrids, the floribundas, the grandifloras, that smell good, have huge petal counts. All of those roses are great to grow. They're fun. They're not fun sometimes. They're picky. They can be annoying. You can hate them and then love them at the same time. Those
bipolar?
Roses,
is that what we're looking for? Bipolar?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It depends on the season in Middle Tennessee on what your roses are going to kind of look like. Now, a different one, though, is going to be this one, and this is called the knockout rose. And I know you have all heard of the knockout rose. They have been overused. I mean, they're everywhere, absolutely everywhere. But why is that? There's a reason for that. They have the most flower power of any plant that I have brought in here today throughout the whole season. So all of these plants that I've talked about so far, every single one of them have their bloom period for, say, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, at the most, and then they're done. That's what you get. You get that bloom for that specific time. Knockout roses bloom almost constantly. If they're happy and they're healthy and they're big and they're in full sun, there's almost not a time, except for the early spring whenever they're leafing out before they start blooming, there's almost not a time that they don't have blooms on them, okay? It is fantastic. I mean, really, as roses go, this one is the best one ever developed whenever it comes to blooming almost constantly. I've never seen another one. Now, they're coming out with some, not coming out, they've been around a while, but like drift roses and flower carpet roses, those are all like shrub roses.
I love those. They're so aromatic.
Yeah, and they smell, a lot of them smell good, and they have really a lot of blooms within the plant too. I didn't bring those in today just because rose is kind of a rose, but they have a lot of flower power to them as well, and they bloom a lot. But this one's kind of the one that came out that literally they knocked it out of the park. Like literally, there was one called Home Run that they came out with first that is a good rose too, and it blooms for a very long time. But then whenever they hybridized this one, they literally knocked it out of the park. There is no other rose that blooms as good as knockouts. They come in all sorts of colors now, actually. It used to just be like kind of pink and red, but now there's pink, red, coral knockout, white knockout, sunny knockout, which is yellow. The yellow one, by the way, has a scent. It smells really good. So if you want to get a knockout rose, I'm a sucker for yellow roses, y'all. I mean, the yellow roses are my favorite by far. And if you get the Sunny Knockout, they have a good smell to them. So worth growing. The only thing I don't like about the Sunny Knockout is that it comes out pretty good yellow, pretty pure, but then it fades to white kind of quickly. So it's not going to hold that rich yellow color like some of the other ones that I love. But if you like a smell good rose, the Sunnies are going to be good for you. So like I said, knockout roses, you really can't beat them once they get big. You can prune them severely if you have to. People take gas trimmers to them. I mean, really, you don't have to worry too much about this plant. It is a true performer and flower power to the max, by far to the max. So certainly we still sell the full out of these. You can always come out here, and we'd have to shut the gate if we didn't have knockout roses. So come on out, we'll get you one.
Charlie on Facebook is asking full sun, and I think that might have been for the Abelia.
Yes, Abelia prefers full sun, most definitely. It can handle a little bit of shade, but you're going to get that best foliage color, especially with the good full sun. So most definitely full sun.
And if that was a different plant you were asking about, Charlie, just let us know.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring this fella in the mix.
Yes, he said yes. So
yes, the Abelia. Yeah, it prefers full sun. So 4 to 6 hours is certainly preferred for best flower power and foliage color. All right, going back to the backbone here. This is Rose of Sharon, and it's technically a hibiscus, which is kind of cool. Hibiscus is, it's like the state flower of Hawaii. Whenever you go there, they give you the leis that are full with the hibiscus flowers. When we think about hibiscus flowers, we think very tropical, very large, blooms, and in all sorts of different colors. You can come out here right now and buy hibiscus in a tree form for like a container around your pool, and it's totally tropical. It's going to totally die over the wintertime. No chance of return. Those are some different hibiscus. Now, this one is a truly hardy one. Rose of Sharon, old school, been around forever. They get fairly large. People would almost call this a small tree. But the way we sell them, they look a lot more shrubby. This one's just starting to crack. It gets its leaves a little bit later than most. Most hibiscus is that way. And so it's just emerging its leaves. It is not even thinking about blooming yet. Nowhere near it. This is a classic midsummer bloomer. So whenever it is hot, almost even late summer actually, whenever it's hot out there, these guys just thrive. So put them in the full sun, most definitely. You don't want to get these in a shade spot. They really like it hot. And they've got all sorts of colors now. There's even, this one I brought in is white with a red eye on it. So it's kind of got this two-tone look. There's a lot of pinks out there. There's soft pink. There's purple out there. And there's even a blue one now. There's one called Blue Chiffon that we sell. That actually is like a light baby blue kind of, which is, it's kind of attractive. I think that one stays a little bit smaller. But like I said, most of them are going to get up into that 8 to 12 foot range as large growing. You can use them on a fence line to create this show. But you talk about flower power, y'all. Hibiscus is money. I mean, it blooms from when it starts pretty much till frost. It shows a new bloom every single day. That's the MO with hibiscus, just so y'all know. It'll bloom during the day, stay open all day, and then it'll close up at night and then drop before the next one's open the next morning. So every single day you've got a brand new bloom. So think about it. If this plant's blooming for that long, how many buds have to be in there? It's loaded. I mean, like thousands of buds have to be in this tree to have a new one freshly open every single day. So classic, old school, easy as pie. Put it in the ground, water it, and never think about it again until it blooms, and it's going to be fine. An easy plant to grow with a ton of flower power with all sorts of different colors these days. Really, really good one for a full sun hot spot.
Very soft wood, easy to cut back too.
Yeah, very easy to cut back, and they deserve a trim every once in a while. They can get out of hand on you.
Yes.
I had an old home I used to live in Jolton that had two Rose of Sharon on the corners of the home. They got too large for the corners of the home. It was just not a good application, but I wasn't about to dig them up or anything. So I just pruned them severely every year. And you more or less just make them mad when you do that because they get back to the same size they were the year before. But it is worth doing that if they're planted in a spot like that. But really, I think they're best used in a hot spot, full sun scenario, even around pools. Now, I say that, not around pools because they're dirty. They drop those blooms every day, so you got to pick them up. Don't put them close to like sidewalks and areas where you walk because their blooms can get a little yucky, especially after a rain. So be mindful of that.
If you're like swimming in a pool and you look out like 20 feet away.
20 feet
and
away.
You see a rose of Sharon, you're
Yes.
like, yes.
That's the perfect
That's my
scenario.
tropical backdrop.
Yeah, because they are a fairly dirty tree. Like I was saying, the blossoms, when they drop, they get kind of gooey, kind of yucky. So, avoid like sidewalks and walking areas. But yeah, like you said, 20 feet away from a pool, get you a stand of hibiscus out there. Hibiscus syriacus, which is the rose of Sharon right here. Old school classic. Still a good plant though.
And I guess another kind of flower powery related perennial would be the hardy hibiscus, right?
Yeah, I should mention that. I didn't bring those in because they are literally a pot. It's a pot of dirt right now. So perennial hibiscus.
Not much of a show.
Yeah, perennial hibiscus comes back from the roots every year, and that's much more of a shrubby little hibiscus, working into that 3 to 5 foot tall and wide scenario. I've got 3 hibiscus in my garden, perennial hibiscus, that come back every year, and they're just starting to throw up some leaves from their roots. They never come back from their sticks. You may as well just clear cut them, and they'll come back from the ground every year. But they're making excellent cultivars nowadays with dark purple foliage with like a beautiful, massive red bloom atop of it. There's whites, there's pinks, there's two-tones. There's all sorts of perennial hibiscus. So I didn't bring them in, like I said, because they're literally showing nothing right now. But look those up because there's some cool varieties of those, and they are fantastic as well. So just another one that we almost we call them perennial hibiscus because they're perennial's MO is that they lose their foliage over the winter and they come back from their roots, which is what perennial hibiscus does. So we almost kind of group them with the perennials. But it ends up being more or less a shrub by the end of the season as well. And that's a excellent full sun loving plant to grow with flower power as big as your head. I mean, literally, they've got some huge dinner plate size blooms now. So yeah, good point, TY.
Well, you got me one for my birthday, so I couldn't.
That's
not
right.
bring it up.
I did.
A red one. It's beautiful.
Nice. All right.
Corinne's asking a Rose of Sharon related question. Can you dig up and plant the shoots that come up?
Certainly. I mean, if they've got their own roots, get as much of the roots as you can from each one of those sticks and transplant them. That's certainly a good way to get some more plants without spending any money. So just be gentle down there. Be whenever anytime you're messing with roots, try to get as much as you can from each one of those stems. And I think Rose of Sharon actually roots pretty easily. So even if you just took cuttings from it, you could probably get some rooting powder and dip it in some rooting powder and then put it in a moist, well drained medium in some pots. You could probably get them to root pretty easily, and then you can transplant from there. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, and we have some trimming related questions. I'm going to get to those right after this last plant, so guys, hang on for that. And one other question related to the knockout rose. Do we have any knockout rose trees? Did they come in tree form at all?
They do come in tree form, and yeah, we will have those. Our roses are set to ship next week from what we've heard. So I'm pretty sure we ordered like 800 roses.
We did.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's insane. That's a lot. So we're trying to keep up with demand there because a lot of people like their roses. And we certainly get a whole number of tree form roses. And yes, knockout rose does come on a tree form, and that's an excellent way to do it too. That way you can plant other things around the base because it's got that single stem to a canopy. So down below that stem, you can plant other things around it. So just increase that flower power, baby. Get some, flowering shrubs down below that tree form rose with the rose atop. Filling out that canopy with the bloom. So yeah, good question, and we should have plenty of those here next week, hopefully.
And in case you're wondering, there's a reason why we asked Austin to do this webinar called Flower Power Shrubs, baby. So last plant.
Yep. All right, last plant. Look at this hideous pot of sticks.
Showstopper.
I'm sorry, but yeah, this is a shrub form crepe myrtle. Okay. We think of crepe myrtles as kind of trees more so, on the corner of your home in the center of a bed as larger growing plants. Now, crepe myrtles, though, have been hybridized, and they still are working on it all the time to get crepe myrtles much smaller, much more as a shrub. This one, like I said, has got kind of hideous sticks over the wintertime. There's nothing pretty about this in the winter. And it is just starting out emerging its leaves right now, which is kind of like a reddish-greenish look whenever they first come out. And this one here is called the Cherry Dazzle Dwarf Crepe Myrtle. And the reason I brought crepe myrtle in today, because as ugly as this is right now, it is going to get pretty, y'all. It's fantastic. These stay small. So let this variety here is saying that it gets about 5 by 5, which is very small for a crepe myrtle.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, because most of them get 20 foot tall if you let them, 15 to 20, and they're much more tree form. This one's round, it's shrubby, it stays tight, and it blooms in the summertime. Crepe myrtle is literally the longest blooming tree/shrub, minus the rose that I was talking about earlier. This one is second best. It blooms for a very, very long time. This one is pure red, little tiny blooms, but in a cluster, it's really, really tight. So it just looks full all over the plant. Certainly a full sun plant. Do not want to give this thing shade. I've seen crepe myrtle in shade, and what happens is they shoot up for light. They don't bloom all that great. They look gangly. They're not, really, really nice and full. So getting them in a full sun environment is the way to do it. And like I said, this Cherry Dazzle series is a beautiful bright red. Now our best-selling dwarf crepe myrtle is one called Pocomoke, and that is a pink blooming variety that stays nice and tight without hardly having to trim. It's truly a shrub. So if you want that kind of bubblegum pink, then Pocomoke will be the one for you. But there's a lot of different dwarf crepe myrtles now, some that, a lot of them that don't get very tall. Good thing about crepe myrtle as well is that you can prune them however you want to. So even if these ones that say 5x5 are starting to get bigger than 5x5, once wintertime comes around, just give them a nice haircut again and take them back down into tight, and you'll see a good response from that. So you can kind of keep a crepe myrtle in check where you want it size-wise, especially with these shrub forms. But if you want a good, long summer blooming plant, dwarf crepe myrtle would certainly have a lot of flower power for you. So there we go, y'all. That's all I brought in today. I know it was a bunch. We ran through it quickly. There's so many more options out there. I physically couldn't get that done today. I'm pretty sure I just heard a truck roll in that's probably got some more plants for us on it. So we're bringing them in just for y'all to take them away on the weekend. So we appreciate that. But yeah, there we go. Flower power shrubs. We got questions?
Yes, lots of trimming questions.
Okay.
When can I trim ever-blooming azaleas?
Ever blooming, like the Encore types.
I'm assuming yes.
Yeah, I'm assuming the Encores, yes. So right after they bloom is really when you want to give them a haircut. So like I said earlier, let them flush, let them be pretty. Right after that fades, give them a haircut, take them back down, and you'll see a response with leaves, and then you should see a rebloom as well in the fall.
Okay. Should I trim lobelia?
Lobelia, like Lobelia cardinalis, like cardinal flower.
Maybe it's Abelia, maybe it's lobelia.
Oh, Abelia.
No, they said lobelia, but maybe they meant Abelia. I'm gonna see if they meant Abelia.
Abelia, yes. What was the question? I'm sorry. When
should I trim it?
Yeah, it's, Abelia this year, so I brought that in because that's kind of a semi-evergreen plant. On mild winters, Abelia can keep most of its leaves throughout the wintertime. This year, it was not the case. Most Abelia lost a lot of their leaves.
Yeah.
So the topmost growth looks a little rough. So if yours are getting a little spindly, or they're looking not as full as they can be, yeah, you want to trim those up. Typically we do that in dormancy. So whenever it's wintertime, whenever they're just sticks is the easiest time to get those trimmed. But most certainly, you can trim Abelia. They really take to a trimming easily. Keeps them tighter. Abelia also has a bad problem about shooting wild hairs up. They'll send these it'll be a round plant, and then all of a sudden you'll see 2 or 3 just shoots. They go up into the sky that are too tall. If you need to remove those, certainly you can always just remove those whenever you see them. But yeah, giving them a nice trim back over the wintertime is certainly good practice for Abelia.
And what is eating the holes in my knockout rose?
That's going to be the larvae of a sawfly. So we just say most common name is they're called rose slugs. They're not slugs at all. They're actually larvae of a little sawfly, a little tiny little fly that flies around. And it happens every year, and it's going to happen to you if you have a rose. I'm sorry, it's Middle Tennessee. It's going to happen. There is never a year where sawflies don't come out, and this year is no exception. So look on the back sides of your leaves. What you're going to see is these tiny little worms that are almost clear, but they're greenish. They've got this green look about them. But like I said, almost clear. They're fairly hard to see because they're small. And they are certainly a nasty pest. They put holes in leaves every single year. So if you want to get on that, we can get you certainly some insecticides to help. BT comes to mind, which is an organic control for worms. So we sell that here.
Makes their stomachs explode.
Do what?
Makes their stomachs explode.
Makes their stomach explode. Yeah, it's technically like a fungus. It's a kind of a weird thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, BT is what it's labeled as. It's an organic approach to getting rid of those sawflies because you are going to see them. And best practice is to get rid of them now because once they start reproducing, you can see about 3 different generations per season. So getting rid of that first generation is going to be a good practice to keeping your rose cleaner.
Also, follow up to the Abelia pruning. Is it too late to do it now?
No, it's not necessarily too late, especially if they're established. But I'm certain they probably have their leaves already, or they're coming out. It would have been nice to have that already done before they come out. But if they're too big on you and they're not doing what they want you to, what you want them to do, then certainly go ahead and trim them up. You might have to wait a couple weeks before you see some new leaves emerge, but it can be done. Abelia is such a tough plant that you can go ahead and get that done.
Okay, and what do you think about crepe murder?
Well, there's a lot of stigma behind that, and I don't like the look of it. Don't get me wrong. I think that crepe myrtle should be planted where they can be allowed to grow and be what they want to be. You can work on a crepe myrtle when it's young and kind of get it to however many stems you want to choose, removing the sucker stems that come up and getting, for me, it's like a 3 to 5 cane system. So like I said, 3 to about 5 different main stems that work up and then fan out to this pretty looking dwarf growing tree. A small growing flowering tree is the way I think they look best. Now, people put them in the wrong spot and they get bigger than what they need them to, so they kind of have to go the crepe murder route, and they've got to take those, just clear cut and lop off the tops of them, which, like I said, I don't like the look of that. I wish that crepe myrtles would just be left alone, but if it has to be done, it has to be done. And the one thing about crepe murder is that it doesn't actually murder anything. You don't kill anything by doing that. You make them look unsightly over the wintertime, and they kind of come back a little funny in the spring until they outgrow that, and then they just look like a tree, like you'd never seen them being cut before. So, like I said, I like putting crepe myrtle in the spot where it should be to let them grow and let them get big, but you're not murdering anything by doing that. It just looks a little unsightly. They're going to come back, and established crepe myrtle is coming back. So, not my favorite, but people do it.
Okay. Well, I think that sums it up for the questions, and I'll let you wrap things up.
Sounds good. We always appreciate y'all watching us do this. I have fun with it. I absolutely love plants. It's all I think about. So I want you to come out and chat with me as much as you can. You want some flowers, you better talk to me because they're my favorite. So, but anything from the smallest seed to the tallest tree, I like talking about it. So,
we do have one other question here. Late arrival. Do you have a fragrant lilac that grows well in Middle Tennessee?
So I've got a love-hate with lilac, okay, y'all? Yeah, lilacs are some of the smelliest shrubs there are, and smelly in a good way. They're fantastic, and we do have some right now. I got to tell you, though, lilac in Middle Tennessee is not all that dependable every single time. I've seen some big lilacs. Don't get me wrong. I drove into work this morning. I saw one in full bloom, looking really, really well, and they prefer good full sun, but they really like it colder than what we give it. So this year we had a pretty cold winter, so I would assume lilac would bloom pretty well this spring for most people.
Mine's doing excellent.
See, and that's because of that cold. Now last winter we had a very mild winter.
I neglect the crap out of it, though.
Do what?
I neglect it really badly, but it still blooms.
It's kind of, you don't really have to do much to a lilac. You just kind of let it be, but the winter dictates how much bloom you're going to get the next season, and sometimes Middle Tennessee is a little warm for lilac, but you find the right spot, find the right home, and get them in, they can be fine. And they certainly smell good.
Would Old Glory be a decent one?
Yeah, Old Glory's a good one. It's been around a while, and we do have some right now. Now they are blooming, so they've been selling. That's typically how it goes out here. So I don't think our inventory is really huge on lilac right now, but you should be able to find some.
Yeah, visit our website to check inventory there.
There you go.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Now we're good.
Cool. All right. Well, y'all have a great day. Like I said, we really appreciate y'all watching. Come out anytime. Come see us. We're busy. We got plants. We're ready to go. So appreciate your time. Have a good one.